AJ Pruitt. I'm a senior government politics and economics double major. Yeah, so I came to UMD without knowing a lot about student government, what it was. The high school that I had gone to, it was a Quaker high school and didn't have student government or anything like that, so it wasn't necessarily something that I entered the university like foreseeing that I would be a part of or anything like that. But I got involved my freshman year in as the parliamentarian, which is really like the rule keeper for the legislature, not a position of power or anything like that. But just because I sort of like the legal aspect, the rules process, things like that. And then the next year I was encouraged by a really close friend of mine, Cole Holacher, who was the liaison to the College Park City Council, to apply to be his deputy. Did that for my sophomore year, and then was approached by, I'd become really good friends in that time with Catherine Swanson, who at the time was the vice president of student affairs, and was planning on running for student body president. So she asked me if I would run with her. She'd seen some of the work that I had done in terms of the city and just around campus. And of course, if Catherine tells you to do something, you usually are better off just doing it. So that's how I got involved, and then had the opportunity to do some really cool stuff my junior year as vice president of student affairs, and then decided at the end of last year that I'd be interested in running, and had a really cool group of people around me, a lot of accomplished student leaders, so made that decision and luckily won. So that's how I've gotten here. Yeah, so as long as I've been involved in SGA, one of the common, I think, campaign promises by people running for office had been, we want to make sure that the Title IX office has proper funding. We understand how important a resource it is for all students. Having a system and an office on campus that can investigate instances of sexual misconduct and sexual assault, as well as civil rights and hate crimes, is just so important to sort of the fabric of our community. But we also saw that there were issues with it. I mean, clearly, state law says that a Title IX investigation should be completed within 60 business days. Our average was 144, and I really didn't think that was a secret. The big mystery here was, how are we going to address this problem and how are we going to solve it? I thought sort of one of the glaring problems was, well, if you need to investigate things faster, you need more staff and personnel that can handle that. The office at the time had 3 investigators that were in charge of investigating hundreds of cases a year. So we saw it as, how can we increase the resources for the Title IX office? So we proposed a student fee. I mean, I think it was proposed, and the way it was thought of was because it was so almost ridiculous sounding that the students were going to propose a fee to pay for something that really should always be provided by the university and really is so important to a student's quality of life and academic experience that you shouldn't have to pay an additional fee to get access to that. And that was sort of the purpose of it, is that people saw how ridiculous it was. The media caught on to how ridiculous it was, and it sort of caught attention, made it to things like the Washington Post, New York Times, Cosmopolitan, all those different places that you want to be if you're trying to make noise and news about something. And then when that happened, the university and its leaderships came to the table and were willing to negotiate a deal that ended up with 6 staff being hired across campus, 3 in the Office of Civil Rights and Sexual Misconduct, and 3 in Care to Stop, the CARE office, which is in the health center, which does some really great work with survivors of sexual assault. And so and we also got an additional $1 million investment per year in resources across campus. So that by no means, it was a great victory. I think it was a great victory for student advocacy. It by no means has gotten us to the perfect place and, where we want to be necessarily, but it was an important first step, I think, in that process. Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a really interesting time right now, just given the national climate around Title IX and sexual misconduct prevention. Secretary DeVos recently rescinded some of the Dear Colleague guidance from the Department of Education that was, for the past 5 to 7 years, has been pretty foundational in how universities especially look at sexual misconduct prevention. So I think a big part of our job coming up as students and as student leaders will be to sort of monitor the situations on our campus. I think that we're really lucky to have a campus right now that seems committed to keeping a strong process in place, but there are also campuses across the country that have wavered a little bit now that they've been given that wiggle room to sort of go back to some of the bad habits that universities have had in the past. So I think that's part of it. The other process is just the continued advocacy for resources. Whether it is on Title IX, whether it's on our mental health counseling services, whether it's on our health center services, you know, a lot of our work that we do is advocating for resources. So that's just going to be a continued effort. It's an interesting question that I don't think I've thought enough about to label myself as that necessarily, but I've always been someone that I think it's really important for me to use the privilege that I have as a white, straight, affluent man. You know, I was born with that certain level of privilege, and to use that to advocate on behalf of people that haven't had those same opportunities because of that has been important. I think women are one of those categories. I mean, there's no doubt that systematically in the past they have felt oppression and they haven't been given the same opportunities as men. So I think that it's just sort of my responsibility to advocate on behalf of them when I can, but also importantly, we have a lot of really, at the University of Maryland, nationally, you know, across the world, we have a lot of female leaders, and not advocating on their behalf, but also helping to lift them up and get to where they want to go is really important. And I think that's something that I can't really understand why anyone would be against that. I mean, I think that we are really lucky to now have a program in place that every student entering the university takes an online training on it. I think that an online training is what you put into it. If you're going to click through the slides and sort of do it and not pay attention, then you're not going to get much out of it. If you're going to take the time, it's not long to just learn about the issues and learn about the resources. So I think that the resources are available to students who are interested in learning more about it. I mean, I think that sort of societally we have to do more to educate everyone about topics around sexual misconduct prevention, but also just sexual health. And we need to revamp our sex ed curriculum across the board. I mean, I think you should start talking about these topics much earlier in life than a lot of schools and a lot of people are approached by them. And if you make that a topic of common understanding that it's all right to talk about in public with people, then you'll solve a lot of the issues that we face. I mean, I think that on the national scale perspective, we all sort of got lucky with the issue. I mean, I always thought the Title IX was a good idea. It was a good way to leverage the support that we had of the student body to action. I think when you come up with creative and innovative ideas like that, you do get lucky sometimes that you get featured like that. I mean, but also just across the country, I think these issues have taken a higher stature in the past couple of years. And that's been really important to the common causes and the students that are leading on these issues to have that sort of support. Because without that national media attention or local media attention, I don't know if we would have gotten to the same end marker that we did without having to charge a student any extra money, but still getting the resources that we were really looking to provide. So that was really important.
Mm-hmm.